Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are wading into a subject that is just so critical for parents and educators. We're talking about the Individualized Education Program, the IEP. For so many people, the whole system feels like this maze of jargon and paperwork, and you're in these meetings where, the school just assumes you understand the legal gravity of it all. So our mission today is really laser focused. We need to unpack the difference between an IEP and a 504 plan. We're going to get into exactly how eligibility is determined and, most importantly, highlight the powerful rights you have as a member of this team.
That framing is, I think, essential. The sources we looked at, they all emphasize that the biggest hurdle is this assumption of knowledge. You're handed these complex legal documents, and unless you're an expert in special ed law, it's easy to feel overwhelmed. Our goal here is to give you that common sense clarity so you can walk into every meeting feeling prepared, informed, and, ready to really advocate for your child.
Okay, let's unpack this. And we have to start with the foundational distinction that trips up almost everyone. The difference between an IEP and a 504 plan. What are we fundamentally talking about here?
We're talking about two completely different federal laws. An IEP comes from the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. And because it's under IDEA, it provides special education services.
So specialized instruction.
Exactly. Individualized goals, related supports, things that fundamentally change the educational content for the child.
And how does that contrast with a 504 plan? If an IEP is about changing the teaching, what's a 504 for?
A 504 plan is from a civil rights law. It's all about access. It provides only accommodations.
Okay, like what?
Think of things like sitting near the teacher or getting extra time on a test. A 504 makes sure the student can access the general curriculum, but it doesn't include that specialized instruction. It doesn't change what the teacher teaches.
That distinction is the key. There was this analogy in the source material that really stuck with me. An IEP changes what your child is taught, but a 504 just changes how they learn in the classroom.
Precisely. And because the IEP is so much more intensive, the eligibility requirements are very specific. It's a mandatory two-prong test.
Okay, what's the first part?
First, the child must have one of the 13 specific disability categories that are recognized by IDEA. That's the diagnosis part.
And the second piece, what's the non-negotiable part?
The disability has to actually impact their educational performance. It has to be so significant that they require special education, that specialized instruction, to make any progress.
So even with a serious diagnosis, they might only qualify for a 504.
Exactly. If they don't need the specialized teaching, it's not an IEP. It's the need that opens that door.
So it's the practical day-to-day impact. If a parent is seeing these struggles, how do they get this whole process started?
It starts with an evaluation. This can include tests, observations, input from teachers, and of course from you. And here's the critical action item. You have the right to request this evaluation in writing at any time.
And that written request is what starts the clock.
It does. That simple letter starts the official timeline for the school to respond.
That is a powerful tool. Now, let's get into those qualifications because I think that helps parents frame their concerns. Here's where it gets really interesting. We should probably run through those 13 categories.
Agreed. And let's maybe group them thematically because just listing them out is not very helpful. Let's start with the ones that are mostly about academic and behavioral challenges.
Okay, what's the most common one?
The biggest one by far is specific learning disability, or SLD. This isn't about intelligence. It's about a disorder in how we process language. So think dyslexia for reading, dysgraphia for writing, dyscalculia for math.
Okay, then what about something like emotional disturbance?
Right, ED or SED. This is a really serious category. It covers things like anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, severe behaviors that really get in the way of learning. Then you have intellectual disability, or ID, which is below average intellectual function, plus challenges with daily life skills. And for younger kids, say 3 to 9, there's developmental delay, or DD. That's for significant delays in, cognitive communication or physical development when it's just too early to be more specific.
Got it. Okay, so what if we shift to categories that are more about physical health or communication?
A really big and diverse one is other health impairment, or OI. This is key because it covers so much. Chronic or acute health problems that limit a child's strength or alertness.
So this is where ADHD would fall.
ADHD, epilepsy, diabetes, heart conditions, Tourette's, yes.
Okay.
As long as it impacts their school day enough to need specialized education.
And what about the more straightforward physical categories?
You have orthopedic impairment, which covers physical disabilities like cerebral palsy or amputations. And then there's traumatic brain injury, or TBI. That's a brain injury from an accident or some kind of trauma that affects things like memory or problem solving.
And the communication and sensory ones are pretty self-explanatory, right?
For the most part, yeah. Autism spectrum disorder, ASD, affects communication and social interaction. Speech or language impairment covers stuttering or issues with understanding or using language. And then, of course, deafness, hearing impairment, and deafblindness.
And the last one is multiple disabilities.
Right, for kids who have more than one condition, and you can't just address one of them to meet their needs. But the main takeaway is that understanding these categories helps you frame your request. You're trying to show the school why the disability requires specialized teaching.
This brings us to the core of this whole thing. Parental advocacy. Let's shift our focus to that mindset change. You are not a guest at the IEP table. You are a required member of the team.
That shift it's transformative. It empowers you. Because the IEP isn't just the school's plan. It is a legally binding document. It protects your child's right to an appropriate education. Every single word in that document matters.
And the sources warn about the danger of vague language. Why is silence in these meetings often just confusion?
Because schools, which are stretched thin, can sometimes lean on generic language. It helps the system because it's flexible, but it offers very little accountability. A vague goal might be, student will improve reading.
Which means nothing, really.
Right. It's impossible to truly measure. So the parent's job is to replace that vague language with specific, quantifiable mandates. You have to replace flexibility for the system with accountability for the child.
So let's detail the rights that allow parents to do that, to break that silence. What legal protections do they need to know?
Okay, first, you have the right to request an IEP meeting at any time. Always put it in writing. You have a right to get copies of all the evaluation results before the meeting.
So you're not seeing them for the first time at the table?
Never. You also have the right to give or refuse consent for services. And, crucially, you can bring an advocate, a therapist, a friend, anyone. You don't have to go alone.
And what happens if that team, which has to include the parent, a general ed teacher, a special ed teacher, an administrator, what if they still disagree?
The law gives you specific ways to resolve disputes.
Yeah.
You can disagree. The first step is usually mediation. That's where a neutral third party helps everyone try to find a solution.
Yeah, and if that doesn't work?
Then you can pursue due process. Now, this is a much more formal legal hearing. Both sides present evidence to an impartial officer who makes a binding decision. It sounds intimidating, but knowing that right exists makes you an equal partner.
That's empowering. But let's get back into the meeting itself. How does a parent turn that vague goal of improving reading into something that's actually actionable?
You have to demand specificity. The goal needs to be individualized. So instead of extra reading, you ask for, say, 30 minutes of specialized reading intervention from a certified teacher 4 times a week.
And to make that measurable,
you use numbers. For example, the student will increase sight word recognition from 50 words to 100 words with 90% accuracy, measured by weekly running records.
See? That's specific, measurable, and it has a timeline.
Okay, but what if the school pushes back? They say they don't have the staff for that, or they just want a broader goal.
That is the moment for assertive questioning. You have to ask 2 critical questions every single time. First, how will this specific support help my child access the curriculum? And second, what will this look like on a day-to-day basis?
Those questions force the plan to become real, to move from paper to the actual classroom.
Exactly. It's where the rubber meets the road. And that accountability has to be ongoing because this isn't a one-time thing.
How often does the school have to review the plan?
By law, at least once a year. That's your annual IEP meeting. But if you have concerns in November, you don't wait. You request a meeting then and there, again, in writing. And a full reevaluation with new testing has to happen every 3 years.
And how do they measure progress on those very specific goals we were just talking about? Every single goal has to have a clear measurement plan. It could be formal tests, teacher data, work samples, and the school has to send you a progress report as often as they send out regular report cards.
And what's the most important rule about that progress?
If progress is not being made, the IEP has to be adjusted. You have a meeting, you change the strategies, you increase the support. The system can't just stay the same if the child isn't advancing.
Let's talk about the scope of services here, because it's way more than just help in one class.
It's vast. The IEP is built around the child's needs, not what the school just happens to offer. So it includes specialized academic instruction reading, math, but also things like social skills or organizational help.
And those related services.
Right. Those are often the therapies that make education even possible. speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, counseling, and then you have all the accommodations and supports. Extra time, breaks, assistive technology, behavior intervention plans, it's all on the table.
Okay, finally, let's tackle one of the biggest fears parents have. The permanent record myth. Will having an IEP limit my child's future? College. Jobs.
We can say this definitively. No, the source material is very clear. An IEP does not go on a child's permanent academic record like grades do. It will not block them from college or from jobs. If anything, it's an engine for success because it helps them build the schools they need.
So what happens when they get to college?
The IEP itself ends, but the documentation from it can be used to get accommodations through the college's disability service office. They might still get extra time on tests, for instance, but they won't be getting that specialized instruction anymore.
And in the professional world?
Employers cannot legally discriminate because of an IEP history. And for some, that IEP documentation can even be vital later on for qualifying for adult services or maybe even SSI benefits. It's a foundational part of their history, not a stain on their record.
That is so reassuring to hear. I mean, the prep for these meetings, it can feel so tedious rereading reports, highlighting the same sentence twice, but that advocacy pays off.
It does. And to summarize the core takeaway here, your job is not to become a lawyer. Your job is to ask clarifying questions until everything makes perfect sense to you. Advocacy becomes calm and effective once you understand how to use the system.
So what does this all mean? It means the law sets you and the school up as partners. But partnership isn't about being quiet. It's about active accountability. We mentioned that you have the right to disagree, to seek mediation, even to file for due process. So if the IEP is this legally binding document, what's the single most important piece of documentation you can collect to ensure accountability? I'd say you need to focus heavily on tracking those measurable progress reports yourself. Because if the school's data says progress is being made, but what you see at home doesn't match up, that's your trigger to call a meeting and demand an adjustment. Hold that progress data close.
Thank you for joining us for this crucial deep dive. Go forward, informed and prepared.